Hello and welcome to my channel. Imagine one day I've requested you as a project manager to plan my project where I'm intending to move from one office to the other. Are you just going to plan the project? Of course not. You need to understand you are going to ask so many questions about the project. So that brings us to a stage in a project that is called starting up the project. In short, it's called project startup. So welcome to project startup. Let's get into the details. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Oscar Mbira. I'm a certified program and project manager. This is the channel I help aspiring project managers and also practicing project managers to succeed. So in this video, I'm going to take you through one of the most important stages or phases of a project. It's called starting up the project or project startup in short. Why is this so important? If you get it right, you have already managed to set up the foundation for success of your project. So, in a project, the first and foremost important point is to get what is called a project mandate. A project mandate is nothing other than an authorization from either your organization or even any business entity that you are representing. So you are being authorized to proceed with the further activities of the project. So that is what we call a project mandate. I've also done a video on project mandates. You can also check it on my channel if you want to learn more about project mandates. So once the project mandate has been given, it doesn't normally have any specific structure. For example, it can be verbal. It can be a summary, one-page summary, or even one paragraph. For example, they might say, as an organization, we want to build a new customer product. It could be any product. It could be a computer product. It could be even a perfume product. It could be even a new process. It can even come as one paragraph to say we want to run a project to change our processes, our internal processes to be efficient. Or it can even come as we want to build a new bridge, or maybe we want to build a new head office or HQ for our company. So that is the kind of mandate that I'm talking about. So it is now upon the project manager, which is you, to expand on that mandate to make sure things are clear. So how do you expand it? You go to a stage of the project called starting up the project, or project startup in short. So in this project startup, it's actually a phase of the project. It has got so many elements that you have to consider. For example, you need to consider the appointment of the project team, the appointment of the executive, the appointment of the project manager, and also the validation or the outlining of the business case, as well as capturing any of the lessons learned. So there are so many activities, and we're going to cover these activities throughout this video. You need to understand these activities that are performed during the project startup phase or starting up phase of the project. So let's go through one by one. I hope you've enjoyed the video so far. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button, the subscribe button, and the notification button so that you're the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. It will also help to grow this channel. It will also help this channel to create more videos like this one. You might be wondering, what exactly is this stage? So this is the first stage that you encounter as a project manager after being given the mandate. This is the stage which is going to determine whether you need to proceed with the project or you don't have to proceed with the project. You get to understand most of these concepts, most of these ideas about starting up a project as we move through the video. So let's go through the activities one by one. I've also created a downloadable link on the checklist that you can use during the project startup. You can find the link in the description below. The first one is appointment of the executive. Projects, organizations, they differ. In some organizations, they have structures and they have a way of running their project. They might say, this is the executive, we want to run the project. They might also say, this is the project manager, we want to run the project. So if you are lucky, that's the kind of project you need to run, the executive is already appointed and you, as the project manager, you have been appointed. That can be done through the mandate process that I've spoken about earlier. Or else, if that is not yet done in the startup project, if that is not yet done in the starting up project phase or project startup phase, you have to be very clear on who is the executive, who is the project sponsor. So the project sponsor must be appointed during the project startup phase. Why do you need this project sponsor? There are various reasons why you need this project sponsor. The first reason is you need someone who's going to make executive decisions for the benefit of the business based on that project. You need someone who's going to make bold decisions in order to support the project. You need someone who's going to be a go-to person when a project manager has got an issue to escalate. So that is the role of the project sponsor or project executive. In most projects, from my experience, you'll find that these project executives or sponsors, they are actually senior members of the organization. Probably we are looking at CFO, which is a Chief Financial Officer, or COO, which is the Chief Operations Officer, or even MD, or even Chief Executive Officer. So these are people who are at a high level who are going to be able to make decisions in the project for the benefit of the organization. So that role, one of the unique points about that role, it's not shareable. This is one of the two roles in a project structure or program structure which is not shared. You cannot share the executive, you cannot share the sponsor role. It can only be one person. Please get it right from me. The project sponsor, project executive role cannot be shared. It can only be one person. So this is the one person who is going to be chairing the project board. We are going to talk about project board later. This is one person who is going to represent the business perspective. And in a nutshell, this is an advocate of the project. So a project sponsor must be appointed either during the mandate process or during the starting up phase of the project or project startup. Now, the second part or the second role that must be appointed first is the project manager. So assuming you were lucky to be appointed project manager during the mandate process or mandate authorization, then you don't need to do anything during the startup of the project. However, if the project manager was not selected during the mandate authorization, once the executive or the project sponsor has been appointed, the project sponsor can go on to appoint a project manager. Project manager is the same like executive. It can only be one person. It can't be shared. If you find someone suggesting that you want project manager role to be shared, my advice is you need to go against that. There should only be one executive, one project manager in every project setup. So why do you need a project manager? Project manager is just like a pilot of the plane. He's the decision maker. He's the one who is supposed to run the project on a daily basis. He's the one who is supposed to produce project reports. He's the one who is supposed to report progress on the project. So a project manager role is very, very important. And that is why you as a project manager, you need to be very much aware of what are you supposed to do if you're appointed to be a project manager. So the next activity after appointment of the project manager is to capture previous lessons. This is very, very important. It's going to be very rare for you to be the first or the only one who is running that project. Of course, there might be cases where you are supposed to be the first one to run the project. Most likely, you are running a project which is probably the second, third, or fourth in the organization. Or even based on experience, it could be the 6th or the 10th project you're running. So there are certain lessons which have been picked either from the organization point of view or from your experience. So those lessons you need to capture so that you don't go into a situation where you repeat the same mistakes, the same errors that either caused that project to either fail or to have an overrun on the budget or even to exceed the timelines or any of the baselines that were set for that project. So you need to make sure that you have captured lessons. You always find different sources of lessons. The first lesson is from the organization. So what it means is you need to look for those maybe former project managers who ran, it could be a similar project or it could be something different. But their experience is very important. You need to learn from them what is it that they've done very well, what is it they have done badly that might require you to learn some lessons. You can even get it from former project members. That is the gold mine of lessons. You can go to the former project managers or former project members. You have some short interviews, short discussions. Sometimes you don't need to make it formal. You can even make it informal. It will work. They will give you information. So you capture all those lessons from previous projects. What you can do better, what caused the previous one to fail. So that is very, very important. That is the stage you also need to open your lessons log. I've also done a video on the lessons log. You can also check it on my channel if you want to learn more on lessons log for a project manager. I hope you've enjoyed the video so far. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button, the subscribe button, and the notification button so that you're the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. It will also help to grow this channel. It will also help this channel to create more videos like this one. Now, you have managed to pick up the lessons from the previous projects. The next stage is to come up with a project governance structure. Project governance structure is nothing other than the team structure, how you expect the project to be run. In most cases, the governance structure has got the project board, and also you have either a mini project board or a change board. Then you also have your project director, program manager, and then the next level is the project manager, which is you. Then below the project manager, the next level you find is the team manager or the team leads in general. After the team leads, you now have the team members. This is now the last structure, and it contains mostly a number of members as compared to other levels. So how do you set up the governance? I've seen from my experience some other projects during the contracting period, which means as they try to invite contractors who are going to implement in case they decide to subcontract, they even come up with the structure. But we are talking of starting up the project. The structure is not yet there. So what you have to do is to make sure that you have your project board, you have your mini project board in case, or change board. You can also have a project director or program manager. Then you have your project manager, project team members, and also project team managers. That is very, very important. Why do you need the project board? The project board is the one which owns the project. So the project manager is running the project on behalf of the project board. That is very, very important. If there are any specific decisions to be made, the project manager is supposed to go to the project board. If there are any certain milestones to be celebrated, for example, or which are going to be affected, the project manager goes to the project board. So you need to understand the project board. I'm going to quickly explain to you on the project board. So project board, normally it has a chair. So the chairperson of the project board is the executive. I've said it before. The chairperson of the board, project board, is the executive. However, the board is supposed to have 3 standard roles or basic roles in terms of project structure or best practice on the project structuring process. So the first one is the business user. So what do we mean by this? There should be someone who is representing the interests of the organization or the business of the organization. From my experience, I've seen that, especially for one of the banking projects that I ran, the business user might not be one person. And this is different from project manager and executive. Business user can be shared. So this role can be shared. You can have so many board members representing business. For example, the banking project I was talking about, we had a user from treasury, we had a user from finance, we also had the user even from ICT, we also had the user from operations, we also had the user from payments. So you don't need to bloat your project board. You don't want your project board to be very big. Normally, what I can advise from my experience, 4 to 12 project board members, it's manageable. If you make it too big, it becomes very difficult to manage. Then the second role is the user. In some cases, you want to call it senior user. What do we mean by senior user? Senior user, this is a representative of the ultimate beneficiaries of the project. That is the department or the people who are going to actually use the deliverables from the project or the results of the project. It could be a process change, it could be a new product, It could be customer service change. It could be a new structure. All those who are going to benefit from this project, they are called users. Why are we talking about senior user? You might have so many users. Remember what I said, you need to have between 4 and 12 board members. So for you to have that number, you don't want to bring 50 users. They can select representatives to represent them as users on the project board. So this role is where you have people defining the requirements. You also have people defining the business case or business benefits. The business case or the business benefits. So this role is very, very important. A user or senior user on the project board. They must be part of the project members. They must be part of the project board members. That is very important. The third role is the supplier. You might be wondering, what is this supplier? In project management terms, normally a supplier is either an individual, an organization, or even any entity that is going to be responsible for producing the project deliverables. Depending on the stage of the project, they are called suppliers because they supply their services, they supply their skills, they supply their knowledge to make sure the project is actually going to deliver what it's supposed to deliver. However, you might find that there are certain big projects like the ones I've run before. You have so many vendors, you have so many contractors, you have so many solution providers. So there's no need to bring all those 50 people into the project board. They have to elect one senior supplier who is going to represent them, or maybe just a few, maybe 2 or 3. It might not necessarily be one. It might not be necessarily be one, but maybe 2 or 3 representatives of the supply side. So that's the board level. You remember, you're doing this in the project startup phase. So it has to be very clear how the board is going to be constituted. You work closely with the executive or the project sponsor to make sure that the project board structure is very clear. Now, after the 3 roles of business, user, and supplier, they are done. Project manager is already defined for you. You have the project manager. Then the next level is what I normally do in my projects. I create a layer of project team managers. Sometimes I just call them team leaders. It's a layer within the structure of the project. The advantage of doing this is you want someone to be running the project, not the project in totality, but specific tasks in a project, in absence, for example. You cannot be everywhere as a project manager. So normally it's easier to put technical leaders, whether they're from finance, they're from ICT, or any other department, or construction. You just put engineers, you just make sure that you have that layer. I normally call them work streams. So you first create the work streams. For example, if I was constructing a building, one of the work stream which I was going to create is the builders. Then I put a team leader or team manager for the builders. The second one is roofing. So obviously I'll put a work stream for roofing with a team lead or a team manager. Then the third one, obviously, we'll talk about plumbing. I'll also put another work stream for plumbing and I put a leader. Even electrification, I can even put a leader as a work stream there. If it was software development, I also put a business analysis or business analyst as a work stream. I can put developers as a work stream. I can also put testers as a work stream, or even the technical or the deployment staff as a work stream. So putting the project into different work streams or structures is very, very important. It gives some sense of ownership. It gives some sense of delivery, some sense of leadership in the project. So as a project manager, your responsibility will just be making sure that all those specific work streams with their specific team leads, they're delivering. They're executing what is required in the project. So that is part of the project structure. So setting up project structure is one of the main activities during project startup phase. The next activity is to validate the business case. So you need to create what is called an outline business case. You don't need to detail it at that point because most of the things are not yet very clear, but at least you have an idea, you have a summary in terms of the benefits to the organization, in terms of the objectives of the project, in terms of the scope of the project. So you create what is called an outline business case. I'm emphasizing the word outline because it's sketchy, something rough, it's not very detailed. You don't expect it to be detailed at that point. So you also need to make sure that you go through that. You need to make sure that you also revisit the business case in terms of objectives, in terms of a scope, and also in terms of expected benefits, or even the benefits realization matrix, if you are very clear on what you're supposed to achieve. So that is also very important. The next activity within the project startup phase is to make sure that you also agree on the project approach. Project approach, it's a very broad term in project management, but I'll quickly explain to you the basics. There are normally 3 approaches in terms of execution of the project, which I can put as the first category, the execution of the project. You can either go for what is called a waterfall model, or agile model, or even hybrid. So let me expand on these 3 approaches that you can use in a project. So if it is a waterfall model or methodology, it means you are doing project tasks in sequence. One, you complete, you go to the next one, you complete, you go to the next one, you complete. I've seen it in some projects through my experience where, for example, the analysis phase has to be completed first before the design phase, and also before the build or the test and confirmation phase. So in actual fact, members are in one stage or one phase at any given moment, and the project is in one phase or one stage at any given moment. So whatever reports that you pull out as a project manager, you are only reporting one stage. So which means before you initiate another stage, you plan for it. When you finish another stage, you create what is called a end stage report, and then you move on like that. So that's the waterfall approach. It works in some situations, it doesn't work in some situations. For example, waterfall is best especially if it's very difficult to change the previous deliverables. For example, you are constructing a building. It will be very easier if you do it the waterfall model. You start your foundation, your structure, your roofing, electrifications, and so on and so forth. It works also for software development, especially if you take the banking solutions in most cases, where the banks will buy the software first and then try to customize it before they put it in production. So they have the analysis, the design, also the build, the test, and the deployment phases. So that is the waterfall model. I hope you've enjoyed the video so far. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button, the subscribe button, and the notification button so that you're the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. It will also help to grow this channel. It will also help this channel to create more videos like this one. The second model or approach is agile. You have heard people saying agility, you need to be agile. The concept behind the agile methodology is for users or end users. Remember, I've spoken about the users, the end users, to quickly start seeing results. And then you polish up the product or whatever you're delivering in the project as you go. There are also some cases where agile methodology is the best. There are also some cases where agile methodology is actually not the best. For example, if you know that you are not able to go back and change or improve the previous products, it's very, very difficult to be agile. However, agile, it also helps to have what are called sprints. You start on something all the way up to the end in a specific period. Then you come again in the next sprint, you take something else all the way up to the end. It's very, very applicable, especially when you're doing software projects. Agile methodology is the best from my experience, because you can take one module, you develop it, you test it, you confirm it all the way, users, they see results, then you start scaling and improving the product from that point onwards. In some cases, it doesn't work because it becomes very difficult to change the previous stage deliverables. It might be even very costly to do that. Then, the third category of the implementation approach or the project approach that you might choose during the project startup phase is called the hybrid. I've been involved in projects where the hybrid was the best. I was also involved in projects where hybrid was the worst. So we had to fall back to waterfall. I've spoken about waterfall before. So what is this hybrid methodology? During the hybrid methodology, you are mixing both waterfall and agile. Sometimes you find that initially when you are starting it's waterfall, then probably in between the project, you go agile. Then towards the end of the project, you might go back to waterfall again. it has got its own pros and cons. For example, where it's applicable, and even where the timelines are very flexible, we have seen that hybrid is actually easy to use. However, where you have got so many constraints, for example, budget constraints, time constraints, technical constraints, technology constraints, hybrid becomes very difficult. Hybrid approach becomes very difficult, especially when you want to switch from one model to the other, from Agile to Waterfall, Waterfall to Agile. You might face some constraints which are very restrictive. So once you have identified the approach that you want to use in terms of Waterfall, Agile, and hybrid, you might also want to discuss the approach you are going to use in terms of resources. Are you going to use internal resources or you're going to use external resources? You also need to decide on your project approach. You might also want to decide in terms of the solution approach. Are you going to go for an off-the-shelf solution? Or if it's software, are you going to go for an open source solution and then you build from there? Sometimes also your approach is determined by the compliance issues or the legal issues. So those are some of the considerations that you have to make when you want to decide on which project approach are you supposed to take. There are some legal or compliance issues. For example, it's a health issue. You might not be allowed to do the project in the open. Probably it has to be an enclosed environment as part of the compliance issue. Or legally, you might not be allowed to do a certain project within some closed residential areas. It has to be done very far. Or sometimes you don't need to do it in the mountains. You have to do it in water. So it all depends on the compliance and the rules of the project environment. You might also want to consider technology. This is very important. I've seen some projects being abandoned because they chose the wrong technology. So technology is very important when it comes to choosing the approach of the project. You might want to say, for example, you are creating a new product. There's a certain machinery or a production plant that you want to use. Maybe it's going out of use or it's very old. So you also need to consider that. If you don't consider that, you start a project, halfway into the project, you face some difficulties, you stop the project, you change the technology, you change the machinery, which is going to be very costly. So that is very important to consider when you are considering the approach of the project. So now you are done with the approach that you want to use on the project. You now need to assemble what is called a project brief. What is a project brief? As a project manager, the name is very clear. It has to be a brief. You are now able to say, we have appointed the project executive, we have appointed the project manager, we have appointed our team structure, we have revisited the business case, we have agreed on the approach. So you want to assemble this into one. I've created a template on the project brief. You can find the link in the description below. Now, all this information, you have put it in place. We now need to go to a very summarized document, which is called project brief. So one of the expected outcome of a project startup phase is a project brief. It has to be brief. So what do you expect to see in the project brief? Project brief is going to consolidate all these other activities that we're talking about, all the outcomes from these other activities, including who is an executive or sponsor, who is the project manager, which is you, the project team structure, the business case, and so on and so forth. Now, I've also created a checklist on the project startup phase. You can find the link in the description below. There are quite a number of sections that have to be populated in a project brief. But however, you are free to customize some of these. So I'm going to take you through those sections in a project brief. So the first one that we are going to look at is called definition, project definition in a project brief. So the project definition, as the name suggests, this is the project definition that is used to set down exactly what the project idea is. If the project idea isn't clear, which is very uncommon, you may need a lot of discussion first. Some sections of the project definition can help you on this. So if the idea is not clear, which is very common, you may need a lot of discussion first for you to appreciate the definition of the project. So once the project definition is very clear to you as the project manager, the next stage is to go for the project background. So what is this project background? I'm going to take you through that. So the background describes how the project idea came into being. It sets the rest of the definition into context. Say, for example, your background section may read, this project was listed in last year's annual reports as part of our drive to reduce delivery times to customers by at least 60%. Or, this is the project in a program of live projects to bring the company into line with the corporate governance requirements of the company. So, after clearly understanding the background of the project, you also need to put in the project brief the objectives of the project. So, let's go through the objectives of the project. For the same project, different people can have different objectives. The project objectives set down the agreed objectives that everyone can then sign up to. So it is very important that the project objectives are aligned by all members, especially the beneficiaries of the project. So in the project objectives, it must be very clear in terms of how each of the 6 control factors, time, cost, quality, scope, and risk and benefits, are also going to be measured and controlled. You may find that a bit of limiting, but if you can always add objectives that don't fit easy into these categories, it will be better. Now, we have specified the project objectives in our project brief. You now need to specify the project scope and exclusions. So let's go through the project scope and exclusions. Project scope and exclusions constitute a valuable section, not only because it sets down what is part of the project, but also because it specifies what is not. So you should be very clear in terms of what is in scope and what is not in scope. That is very, very important during the startup of the project or project startup. The project scope is important in managing expectations. A list of what is in the project isn't necessarily enough, and at the end of the business, users can be disappointed because we haven't included something that the business area was expecting. So you'll find that most of the requirements might be missing. These exclusions aren't the whole planet outside the project, but rather those areas where misunderstandings may occur. During the project, it is very, very important during the project startup phase to specify what the project is including and what the project is excluding. This is very, very important. The next phase of the project brief, it is the assumptions and constraints. What do we mean by this? It is very unlikely that you find a project which is open-ended. Most projects you find they have time limitation, they also have budget limitations, even technical limitations. So as you go through the project startup phase, you must make sure that you are very clear in terms of the assumptions in the project. You must be very clear in terms of the constraints in the project. I've done a video on the project constraints and project baselines. You can also check that video on my channel. It's quite important for you to appreciate the baselines in a project. So, one of the expectations in the project brief is the stakeholder identification. You should be able to identify the stakeholders in the project. So, someone might ask, who is a stakeholder? What I normally do in my project, for you to be able to pick the stakeholders in a project, look for those with influence. Look for those who are interested in the project. In most cases, these are the people who are going to form the stakeholders in a project. It could be the regulator, the government, it could be any inspectors, for example, it could be a specific department, it could be legal, it could be the courts, or any interested parties. Stakeholder identification is very, very important during project startup. It's going to help you to set the right footing for your project as you move from one phase to the other. So, the other section of the project brief that you have to complete or you have to document is the project tolerance. What do we mean by tolerance? As you run the project, and even from my experience, it's easier if you're running a project with a tolerance. It's something that you can negotiate with the project board or the project sponsor or even the executive. It's most unlikely that, for example, if it's a budget, you're going to be exactly within the budget. Sometimes you might exceed the budget. So we are talking of that exceeding of the budget. How far can you exceed? How elastic is that budget in a project? What I've seen with other projects, they might say 10%, which means if your project, for example, the simplest example, if it was $100, you can go as far as $110 without asking for approval, without asking for any authorization from the project board. In some cases, they even talk about quality of products. Maybe your project is producing a certain product, they might say, if the tolerance is within 5% or 3% or 2%, then you proceed. So project tolerances should be documented. For example, timelines. Say your project was supposed to run for 2 years. They might say if you exceed by 3 months or 6 months, it will still be acceptable. So in the project brief, during the project startup phase, make sure that you have documented your project tolerances. That is very, very important. And the last but not least section of the project brief is what is called interfacing. So we want to expand on that. What do you mean by interfacing? Especially these days, most projects are not run in isolation. They have to interact either externally with other systems, for example, other processes, even other regulatory channels, and so on and so forth. Other processes or any channels, that is very, very common. Or maybe the interaction or the interfacing is into the project. So which means you're waiting for something external to come into the project. So during this time of a project startup, this is an opportunity to clearly label and state and document what are the interfaces that are going to interact with your project. It has to be well documented. You might not have all, but at least you must have some idea. So every project, it must have a specific outcome. It could be just the result that you want to create. It could be a product that you want to create. It could be a service. So one of the most important sections that you have to document in the project brief is the product description. What do you mean by product? It could be any deliverable in the project. You might not have all of them, but most likely you have an idea of how many and which products are you going to produce or are you going to have in the project. So you also need to describe them in terms of quality, in terms of acceptance criteria. So make sure that your project brief, it has to be brief. Don't make it too detailed. It has to be brief. What are the expected deliverables? What are the expected products along the chain of the project? That is very, very critical. So your project brief also should have the role description. Remember, we discussed all those project roles. You also need to describe them. The approach, you just take it from the previous section. We discussed the project approach. So now, the second phase or second stage after the project brief is to create what is called the plan of the initiation stage. Initiation stage is the second stage where you are supposed to initiate the project assuming there was approval from the project board. So during the startup phase, you are validating the business idea, you are validating the business benefits, you have put together a project brief which specifies the expected costs, timelines, project structure, and so on and so forth. So once that is done, you have to seek approval to initiate the project. So what does it mean? It means assuming there's an agreement to go ahead with the project. I've seen some projects which are actually stopped just after the project startup phase. Why? Because the benefits could not be very visible or justified in terms of the costs that is going to take to run the project. So they'll be stopped. So assuming they've approved, either the organization, the executive, or project board, they've accepted, they've approved for the project to go on. The next stage now is to kick off the project and then you go to initiation. So what does it mean to say kick off? It means you now need to assemble people, you now need to sensitize people, you now need to let people know that we are about to embark on the project which was mandated by the organization to be run. I've also done a video on project kickoff. You can also check it on my channel if you want to appreciate the activities and what has to be done during project kickoff. So once the kickoff is done, you move on to what is called initiation of the project. This is one of the most important phases of the project. How to initiate the project. I've done a different video on project initiation. You can also check it on my channel. So once you have been approved to move on to project initiation, it's now time to go to initiation stage. If you want me to create additional videos based on the concepts the techniques and all the information that we have discussed earlier in this video, or else you have some clarifications, let me know in the comment section below.